Okay, so let's get started. So thank you everyone for coming to this panel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joan Llull, and I'm here based in the Autonoma campus of the BSc. But I'm also the data editor of the Econometric Society, and it's in that role that I organized this session today, which we have very amazing panelists, and we're going to talk about a very important topic, we think. So, I mean, as you may all have noticed in the last years, we've experienced a revolution in transparency in journals. Now, you know, the vast majority of journals ask you to publish your replication packages, your data, your codes. Many journals, an increasing number, appointed data editors, and we run pre-acceptance reproducibility checks on the papers. And even in the last year, we've seen a couple of retractions from top journals. So things are changing, and I think, you know, for a good reason, to increase transparency of research. But of course, we're still far away from the gold standard. And it's also, as in any revolution, there are also, you know, like complex issues that emerge and, you know, that need to be subject to debate. And that's what we're here for today. So the plan for today is to, you know, discuss broadly about data sharing. So today we're not going to talk much about reproducibility of code or anything like that. We're going to talk about data sharing policies, especially, even though at the end there's going to be room for questions, and you're also free to ask questions on the other dimension. And we're going to talk about one aspect of data sharing policies that was based on actually a conversation that Mikko Škoren, who's sitting here, and I received in our condition of data editors. You know, like some well-known researcher approached us and said, well, you know, I have this paper. It's a, you know, type of history paper that spent lots of resources in collecting data. So we have this paper we think is perfect for journal A. But, you know, if I have to publish all my raw data when it gets accepted, you know, like I invest so much, I would rather do a few papers before I do that. So I'm going to send it to journal B, right? And then, you know, like this is a relevant question. And we thought, well, you know, like, is this an issue? I mean, are journals asking you too much, as we put here in the provocative title, no? And we don't know. The answer is we don't know, and that's why we're here today. You know, like for the profession, and, you know, like a representation, an amazing representation of the different stakeholders in the profession, to have this debate, and also you to participate in that, right? So that's what today is about. So today is about you know, what happens when data is very costly to produce. I mean, do authors act strategically? Are there going to be papers that are not going to be done imagine when all journals ask you to share your data? You know, is there some papers that's not going to be done, or is papers that are going to see the light of the day only a few years after, because authors are holding them until they have like 5 papers lined up and then submit them all together? And then, you know, the second part of the question is, okay, let's say, imagine this happens, should we do something about it? You know, I mean, should journals, you know, like adjust or take an action? Or, you know, like, I mean, we just can go to the second best, because this also, you know, acting on this then generates information problems and moral hazard problems and whatever, and maybe we don't want to do anything about it, right? So we don't know the answers to all this. I mean, hopefully we will have a much clearer idea after today, and that's what this roundtable is about. So it's going to be a pure roundtable, so it's going to be no presentations or anything like that. The way in which this is going to go is now, after I introduce our amazing panelists, I'm gonna shoot questions, give the floor to each of them to debate about it. Okay, and you know, and at the end, we're going to try to save time for questions from the audience at the end, and they will also debate about those questions. Okay, so let me introduce the panelists very briefly. I'm absolutely not making justice to their super amazing CVs, but you know, it's 60 minutes, so for the interest of time, I'm going to be brief. So first, at the beginning of the panel, we have Guido Imbens. So he's the applied econometrics professor and professor of economics at Stanford GSB. So he graduated from Brown in '91, and he is published so extensively in top journals it's very hard to summarize, but he's been distinguished by many awards, and as the one that you are all aware of, he got the Nobel Prize in small prize. In 2021 with David Card and George Angrist for his methodological contributions in the analysis of causal relationships. But he's also the editor of Econometrica, so on top of being able to share his wisdom as an economist, also he's going to be able to provide the views of an important stakeholder, which is the journals, right? So he's going to, in a way, represent the view of journals in this debate. So then we have Marie Connolly. So Marie is professor of economics and vice dean of research at University of Montreal, at UQAM, Montreal. So she graduated in Princeton in 2007, and she has published an extensive list of papers in a variety of topics in applied econometrics, topics that range from popular music, gender gaps in the labor market, intergenerational mobility and inequality, weather or happiness. So she's extremely broad, and this is great. And also importantly, she's currently the data editor of the Canadian Journal of Economics. Okay, so in this case, she's also going to be able to provide us with the views of a data editor. Okay, so this is Marie. Then we have Sule Alan, who is a professor of economics at the European University Institute and adjunct professor at Bilkent University. So she graduated from McMaster in 2002. And she has produced research and published in many top journals on a variety of topics in empirical micro, including education, migrant integration, gender, and household behavior. And she's the co-editor of an economic journal, so she also will have the views of journals, but especially given that a large portion of her research is in the field of field experiments in general. So she is one of those researchers that produce very costly data, and primary data, and she's going to be able to give us the views of the other side of the table, those who produce costly data. And finally, we have José García-Montalvo, who's a local. So José is professor of economics here at Pompeu Fabra and a research professor at the BSc and at EEA in Valencia. So José graduated from Harvard in '93, and his research, also in many top journals, covers a large variety of topics from terrorism, political economy, housing, economic history, among others. One of the nice things of José for today's debate is that, he essentially worked with almost all types of data. Part of his research is on administrative data obtained from firms, through direct contact with the firms, also experiments. And in the last few years, together with Marta, who's also there in the audience at the back, and some others, they have worked on historical data, digitizing files from the Archivo de las Indias in Sevilla. So, this is, scanning, or I guess, I don't know how it's done, a large number of files. We have an amazing lecture yesterday about this by Maristela. So is another producer of, or user of costly to produce data. So he's going to, represent another field that is also, often in the cost of data production, okay? So, I'm not going to spend more on this introduction. I think that we all want to hear our panelists talk. So I'm going to start shooting our first question, which again, first couple of questions are going to be more broadly. So, I would like to first know your views on the direction that the journals are taking in terms of transparency, what I was summarizing at the beginning. So we could start, for example, from Guido, and then move on.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this panel and for inviting me to be on it. So I think the recent developments have been great. The data editors, and there's a whole bunch of them here now, Lars, Miklos, I'm going to say nice things about them because Miklos actually recently handling a paper of mine, making sure that it actually does replicate. Joan, Marie, but I think that's been a great development. It's sort of clear, and sort of all these data editors have can confirm this, that pretty much none of the papers submitted, none of the replication packages submitted immediately replicates. And so, which really means that the numbers we've been publishing in a lot of cases couldn't really be checked or verified. And so it's, I think it's been a great development that now we have a system in place where we can do that systematically, and that for a lot of the journals we do know now that the numbers are meaningful, that they actually can be verified. And I think this is still an ongoing process, but my guess is that pretty much all the journals will move towards a system where all the papers that they publish will get verified one way or the other. And there's issues to be decided exactly how to deal with confidential data and how much we can check there. But we will move to a system where people do have to submit code, they have to submit the data as much as possible, and I think that's a very important positive development, and it'll increase the quality of the publication process and the journals substantially.
Thank you again for organizing the panel. So I'll echo the comments, but I'll also add a few more points. So I think one of the reasons why it's a good development is open science, and so we do things in a scientific manner, and we want other people to be able to build from what we do. And one big part of this is to be able to not reconstruct everything from scratch every time, but to be able to learn from the code and the data that's already been produced. And so it would be a waste of resources to have to redo everything all the time. So that's a positive development. And I'd like to bring in another point. And this is, so the previous was more a general social good, but one is the individual good. By having these policies, it creates a commitment device for the individual researchers to actually make sure that everything runs smoothly and is well documented. And that way, other people, including your future self, are able to take what you've done and learn from it and build from it. And I'll just give one example. My first paper out of my dissertation, which was 15 years ago, I guess it's long or not so long ago, I don't know. In years after it was published, some people came to me and said, oh, this was really great, can you give me the data? And at the very beginning I had it, and at some point I didn't have it because the computer it was on crashed, and I didn't have it. So if these policies had been in place, I would have backed up everything onto a secure repository where it would have been available, not only back then, but still today. And so now it's probably somewhat lost. And so in that sense, it would have been good for me, good for everybody.
I guess I agree that we are going toward a real good direction in terms of replication and transparency of research, and the journals are all on the same track, and EJ is there as well, and so many other journals. And it's great that we actually ask the authors of empirical work to produce their data, to produce their code, so we can actually see, replicate. And this is not to check the integrity of the researcher. Actually, it's just like if there's any genuine mistake in the code, if the results actually hold after several ways of checking it. And this is just a great direction. On the other side, what's happening also in terms of transparency and integrity of research, especially in the primary data collection, is the registry. So a lot of journals, so many journals are still not asking, but a lot of journals are really happy that your work is registered, and we know what kind of outcomes you're going to look at, we know what kind of hypotheses you're going to test, and all of that is actually very, very good developments in terms of making science open and making scientific results reliable when we communicate with not just the scientific community, but when we communicate with the public.
I mean, I agree with what has been said up to now. This is a very much welcome movement. In other sciences, they've been doing this for a long time, and we know that since the 80s, the number of retracted papers has multiplied by 10 in sciences that are very hard on this. And dishonest of those, some of them are errors and some of them are dishonest. And dishonest is 80% of it. So we know that in other sciences, things kind of, and economists are scientists like others. So probably, you know, we need to go in this direction because probably the proportions are similar in our science. What worries me, and I think is something that we should consider, is the fact that we may move too fast or too restrictive, and we may not see the experiences of other sciences or look at them to learn what they have done in the past. Because it seems like we are reinventing many things that have been already invented by other sciences that have been working in this issue for many decades. So this is the only worry that I have as a general worry. Then we could get specific about particular data sets and how to deal with them.
I guess there was a lot of agreement, so I suppose there's no further replies on that. So, I mean, we talk about something important and reproducibility of code and all, and today now I'm going to move the debate towards more the data part of it, right? So many of the data sharing policies of journals today, and also funding agencies, they're requiring you the publication not of the analysis data, right, the one you already cleaned and all, but the raw data, right? This applies not only to primary data, also to secondary data, no? So the data as you guide. So what is your opinion about that specific requirement?
Yeah, so you know our policy well, since you're in charge of actually implementing it. In principle, we require the posting of the raw data, and of course in many cases that's not feasible. That's because the data are confidential, and in some cases people spend money getting the data in a way that makes it difficult to just share that for everybody. So I do want to kind of distinguish there between the fact that now we're very insistent on the results being replicated, and so that the data editor has access to the data and can actually see that the numbers were produced. We would also like the data to be available, but there we're still trying to figure out exactly what is possible there. And it's clear that in some cases we can't do quite as much as what we would like. People may be able to generate data that look very much like the actual data and post that. They can at least post their code. So there's lots of things in between posting the actual raw data and not posting anything. So we have to figure out exactly what's going to work well in practice, while keeping in mind that clearly there's a sense in which it's fair that people who spend a lot of effort and money collecting data get to use them, have some ownership over those, while at the same time making sure that what we actually publish is right and means what it claims it means.
Yeah, I think on top of the data, the code, the cleaning code, the part of your programs that go from those raw data to the data set that you're going to run your regression from, I think this part is often the part where there's the most assumptions or decisions that are being made, and that sometimes you just don't have room in your paper to describe all the very many little steps. So you'll say, okay, I select people who are aged between 25 and 49, so that's easy, and it's reflected in your code. But there are many cases, especially when you work with data that are a little messy, that you're going to have to clean, and sometimes that cleanup part is completely irreplicable if you don't provide the file that you've used, the program that you've used. And so there's providing the raw data, and then there's also providing the set of program files that go from those raw data to when you're actually going to start preparing your regression tables. And so I think this is very important. Obviously, what I just mentioned is mostly in the case where those raw data are not primary data that you collect, so that's I guess we'll get to that. But in case of secondary data, this is not as important in my mind as the program files.
So yeah, I agree. In the secondary data, and you just have to decide what is raw data, what is actually semi-raw data, and then how much, because often cleaning is a big part. Cleaning the data is a big part, and then when you have very messy primary data, there are so many steps of cleaning. But in terms of the secondary data, I'm thinking about like the thing in my mind is like PSID, for example, right? So much is done for you to download PSID already. Like, you know, when you download PSID from the website, there's already so much done for the data in terms of cleaning, in terms of making it accessible. And then you do a lot of cleaning. You have to, depending on your research question, you generate your variables and everything. I totally agree that this is just a kind of a low cost and is a good public provision for the other researchers that they see going from raw data to the analysis data, and then we should have the cleaning files, and we should have the other analysis files definitely available for the replication and transparency purposes. But I think we're going to come to the difference between replication, transparency, and the public good provision later, right? That's two different things that we are discussing here. So, okay, I'm just going to.
I will not add anything else for the sake of time. I agree basically with.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna do the last one before, last general one before we go to the real topic. I mean, it has mentioned here the confidential data. No? I mean, this is you know, like a complex issue. Of course, you know, like we want data as open as possible, but as close as it is necessary, you know, to preserve anonymity and all the constraints. And also, many times we don't put the constraints; it's the data providers who put them, right? The problem sometimes with this is that, you know, like there is also the possibility that just authors say, oh, no, I cannot share the data, right? And that's a way to avoid all the checks, all the transparency. So here, of course, different journals do slightly different things, but more or less all in the same direction. You know, sometimes we try to get into the data, but then some journals also ask you you know, to provide some fake data. Guido was mentioned that, no, to some synthetic data that reproduces, that doesn't reproduce the results in the paper, but you know, like allows you to run the codes and so on, no? So my questions here on this confidential data section would be, so do you think that actually there is this issue that authors may actually, you know, try to hide behind, I cannot share my data, to not publish that? And do you think that it is useful that, you know, there is also fake data created there just to run the code? So we can start from Guido again.
Yeah, so yes, probably people do sometimes try to hide behind confidentiality and trying not to make the data available, because that creates problems, because it means that the journals have to figure out whether these are actually real issues or whether whether it's people just being unwilling to make the data available. And in the end, if people are unwilling to make the data available, but it's possible, then we may decide we don't really want to publish the things, and maybe they should go to other journals. I think this is one place where journals should be competing. And if some journals say we want to be very transparent, we want to make clear that the results that we publish have numbers that can be replicated, and that people can do other things to check whether the results are meaningful by reanalyzing the data. And other journals say, well, we don't want to do that, and it's fine if the data is not available. I think that it's reasonable if journals are competing there, and we're going to try to be on the side of making the data available as much as possible. I think that's the editorial board views that that's the right thing to do, and so that's the direction we'll go in. And that sometimes runs into complications when the data really are confidential. A long time ago, I actually collected data myself for a paper with Don Rubin and Bruce Sassadote, where we surveyed people who'd won the lottery, and there the approval we got from the IRB insisted that we would not make the data available to other researchers. At that time, that didn't seem that big a deal. I think there was also some language that we could go back to the individuals and ask them for permission, but we can't. That would be a huge job as well. So it's unfortunate we can't make that data available. And if I was doing that now, I might push a little harder against the IRB and try to find ways of making that available in some form. But it's clear that there's still going to be cases where the data just cannot be made available. And if these are very important topics, we still have to make a decision whether we want to publish these things. In many cases, I think it will be possible to get permission to make the data available to the editors so that they can still do the replication part, but that doesn't help other researchers who want to do robustness analysis. And so that is still an ongoing problem that we haven't quite solved.
Okay, I'll give the data editor answer, which is when I receive an author's package, the most important thing that I look for, the first thing that I look at is the README file that tells me where the data, what data has been used, where it comes from, and it cites it. And if that is well described, it doesn't really matter if the data are confidential, because somebody else could say, okay, the data are not part of the package, but I can still follow those steps and ask for permission to access it. So if everything is well referenced and is clear, and so that's the the beauty of having a well referenced README file. But in a sense that sort of leaves to the journal only the responsibility of having those that data availability and those citations well put together, and it puts the burden of accessing those data or replicating the packages not on the journals but on the individual researchers. But in the sense, the journal is helping the researcher go from this idea to actually, I'm going to be able to do it because I'm going to be able to follow those steps. So that's what happens with confidential data. But then there's many different types of confidential data. There the data that had to be destroyed, or the data that cannot be shared under any circumstance. And then there's the data that's from, say, the Census Bureau, which are confidential. I can't share them, but there's an established process for a researcher to gain access. So they come in many different colors, and my data editor answer again is the more detailed and precise you are when you describe to me how you access the data, well, the better it is for future applications.
And also the confidentiality requirements are getting a bit like more relaxed, I think, in the sense that I think like the firm data that we use, or the government merge, this Scandinavian data is everybody's dream data. And there are ways we develop ways to actually access those data for replication purposes. Again, not the public good provision, but replication purposes. And even the firms, they're in the position of understanding the replication package is important. The results have to be replicated. And but in terms of providing the data for other researchers is another issue. But I think from a data editor point of view, or the journal editor point of view, is my first order concern is the replicability, and then how the results are produced, if the results are correct, and if the results are replicated. My secondary, to be honest, is that other people can use the data or not is a secondary issue in this process. My feeling is the confidentiality requirements are being, this is how I see they're being relaxed. And recently I had this, and in the application process, a lot of journals actually ask is your data confidential? Are you going to provide the data? So say it at the beginning, right? So it is, you say it at the beginning, I'm not going to provide my data. Here's my result, but I'm not going to provide my data. Does kind of affect, it just gives you the discomfort, actually, what kind of data, what you're going to produce. But then often people try their best to give you access. It's my experience that the author says it's really, really not possible to produce this bit of the data for you, but we can actually give you some simulated results based on that, for example. So there are ways to work around confidentiality and bits of the data that is absolutely confidential. And we are going toward that direction. Authors understand, the editors understand, and of course the editors do understand as well.
Yeah, I think this is the critical issue here is the issue of reanalyzing versus replicating. So what we should, in the journals, what editors should aim at is at replication. Not reanalysis is a second order or a third order issue in this question, because I mean reanalysis. If something is not robust to all the questions that the referees have asked, is that something that will be enough for retracting a paper? No. Does it replicate with the data that you have? So these are two different issues, and I think we should keep them separated. With respect to confidential data, I mean, there are exemption policies in all the journals with respect to confidential third-party data, but some of the exceptions, like in the data and code availability standard, it says that when you have this type of data, you provide interested investigators necessary information on how to obtain the data, even if the data is provided by a third party at a monetary cost, okay? In many cases, there is no way that you're going to get this data. We are working with data, internal data of the largest bank in Spain, okay? There is no way I can guarantee that if you apply for that, you will be allowed to get into that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you won't be allowed to get into that. Yesterday, the governor of the Bank of Spain explained one of the figures there was obtained from internal data of the BBVA. You won't be allowed to get into their clients' information at in any time or at any cost. It's not a question of cost. So in other journals, what they say is, and you should provide a method to apply for those data. Then you'll get or not the data. That depends on the policy of the journal. I think that the issue of the fake data sets is a very good alternative for these cases. I think there is another alternative, which the American Economic Review includes in the not publicly available data. It says the data editor or a designated third-party replicator who can provide a third-party reproducibility report. In my case, I would go to, like I said, and say to the auditor, please, can you, here are the codes, please run these in their servers and provide a report, sign the report, and give it to me, because I need it for the American Economic Review to present the paper. This is a way to get around, this is for this particular type of data, but we could extend that to other data, searching for a way to provide security to the editor that replicates and is reproducible. And the other thing is the fact that you were mentioning, so when you have this type of data and you are going to send the paper to a journal, you care about what the editor is going to think when you tell them, my data is confidential, but really confidential, okay? Is he going to like that or not? Is he going to say no immediately? Because in some of the policies it says, this subjective sentence of is the editor and the data editor who will decide on this. Well, it would be nice to have more certainty about what are exactly the requirements that will be applied in this particular case, because in other cases you will say, well, I start from a negative side, no? So the editor will look at this and say, we will review it, but better if we don't publish it.
Okay, so instead of giving you back to work, I think we will go straight to the questions of the debate. And now, just to give everyone same chances to speak first or last, I'm going to start from the other corner of the table. So, you know, the questions I was asking before, do you really think that that authors of papers that you know, that create costly data, like in your case of you two, like your papers, do you think that there is a possibility that some authors decide not to publish a paper because, or not to produce a paper because it's not worth it if they have to give the data right away, or that they can delay their publication of the papers? Let's start from Jose now.
Yeah, I think from my experience, where data, parts of the data, this historical data, have taken more than 2 years to be produced, with the names and the surnames and the last names of all the colonizers, the first colonizers of the U.S. coming from Spain. It's obviously, for that type of investment, if you don't get a high return, you shouldn't get into it. So, yeah, and return is several papers. If you just get one paper and then data is public, it's like when you get a molecule for a particular drug and then you don't have a patent for it. So you have to probably put it public immediately, and everyone would take, if you have a large investment, that is not going to be optimal. So in that respect, it's true that you try to do some strategic thinking and try to get everything thought previously, so as quick as possible, or target other journals that don't have, have a different data sharing policy. I think that in this respect, we could also have data policies that give a grace period to this kind of production of data. So I will send you all my data, but please don't publish it. Just replicate it. Give me a grace period of 5 years, or something like that. Okay, and there are other alternatives, like or send a pre-designed list of papers that you are going to write, 4 or 5, with these names, and please wait until these papers are published. Something like that could help, because otherwise, I mean, there is an inefficiency here, which is for a consolidated researcher who is not, who wants to get published the research, they can think in sending it to other journals like Science or Nature or PNAS or others. Okay, for a younger researcher who has to get a name in economics, you have to start with economic journals. If all the economic journals get very strict in that respect, that you have to publish immediately your data, then that could be problematic and a little bit unfair for some of the researchers.
So I think we are very far from it right now. So we don't have the journals pushing us to publish the raw data immediately, right? So that's not happening. So, but that's why when I decide to go after a really costly data collection project, I don't actually think about, okay, am I doing this I'm doing this, but there's not going to be a return for it. Honestly, I don't think about it at the moment, because I love the research question, and there's a huge fixed cost waiting for me to be in the field collecting data. If you notice, if you're following the development economics, the developments in the development economics literature, is that there's this amazing primary data production going on, right? So this is in the last few decades. So we have questions, we go and collect primary data, and then there is always a huge fixed cost, initial cost, to go into a field. And often we work in really risky areas. It's not just the monetary cost of it. Actually, it's nothing like the monetary cost of it. Of course, it's costly in terms of money. But the other cost is you take huge risks to work in conflict areas, like in my case. You take huge risks in, every time we go in the field, we lose like how many? 3-4 kilos. We don't eat. So we have like a conflict all over the place. We have guns and shooting. And it's like we are in the field, so we pay this fixed cost. And then you don't do this for, I'm going to write a quick paper and then move on with my life. So you are in the field and you have several hypotheses you want to test. This is the way we do this kind of research, and I think history does the same. I have this fixed investment, huge investment, and I want to answer so many questions with this data that has not been answered before. So for that reason, so the question is, should we have this public good provision after we do this? Yes, the answer to that is yes. The question is when, right? It's like a drug patent issue, right? So we innovate, we do things, we collect the data. It's amazing data. It's never been used before, and then you can answer so many questions with it. All the questions are in my mind, but there are other questions that are not in my mind, probably. So many people later on can use my data and answer those questions. But in the period that I incur the cost, and the following that period that I want to write multiple papers, I need a grace period. And then you know the writing process is long. Revision process is long, and one paper doesn't come very easily. 3 papers come really not that easy. So, so the thing is, I'm all for it. You have to give your data to the data editor for replicability and transparency reason. They have to check. I mean, I love them to check. I have multiple people. Like, for example, at JPAL, we produce our paper, and we give our raw data to JPAL staff to recheck everything. So we want to make sure that everything is correct, because we have all the incentives to have everything correct before even go to the data editors. So we have that incentive. But when it comes to public good provision, you have to think about the cost of incurring this cost of collecting this primary data. It should be public eventually. For example, I'm collecting data at the moment with ERC money. ERC is European taxpayers' money, of course. It has to be public eventually, but not until I dry it out a little bit. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not going to add too much. I agree. It's a really interesting parallel with the patent protection. So the question then becomes, what's the period of protection that is needed? I also think, as Joan said in the introduction, we're moving from, a number of years ago, there was none of that. There's nothing, no requirements. Some people were sharing, some people weren't, whether it's data or code. And now we've moved in one direction, and it's the broad direction. Oh, give us your, provide data and files. And now we're sort of getting to the finer cases. Oh, okay, but wait, what if, we're in that situation where Sule was saying, oh, it's costly, there's a lot of, so what do we do with this? And those are the sort of fine-tuning of the policies and practices that is the stage we're at, right? It's not the general idea, we need to be more open and transparent. It's the, okay, but how do we manage this and make it so in a way that you're not going to get negative consequences in terms of people not undertaking those projects because they're not going to get any benefit, or not submitting right away, or not submitting at all, or submitting to journals that don't have those policies because of that reason. So I think we're just trying to find out where we are in that equilibrium.
So Jose mentioned 2 ideas, kind of one where you sort of list a number of projects that you're going to be working on with the data in the future that's sort of somehow are embargoed. I think that would actually be very hard to enforce, because it's kind of difficult to see how you would prevent people from, if the data is available, from actually doing that. So I'm not a big fan of that. I don't see any problem with having some grace period where people don't have to make the data publicly available. I'm not sure, though, that that's always in the author's interest. I mean, if you look back at the Card-Kruger work on the minimum wage, they did primary data collection at these fast food restaurants with a fair amount of effort, calling all these places and collecting these data. They wrote one paper and they made the data available. And I think making the data available in that case really helped their case. That made the paper much more interesting. Lots of other people used that data, probed that data, wanted to see how robust these results were, and that they got a lot more attention for their work. If instead they had said, well, we want to keep this for 5 years and then other people can do it too, I don't think that the paper would have been nearly as influential. So I'm not convinced that it's always in the author's interest to actually keep the data to themselves. But I think if they feel that that's the case, I would not have a big problem with authors asking for a couple of years of exclusive use of the data and so not posting it. I think I would want to put in the paper that the data will be made available and sort of put the timeline on there so there's a clear plan for that, but not making it available directly. I don't see that as a big problem.
Just a comment on your last point. So there was this question that you sent us on the reasons why editors may want to have these shared data policies in place. And there is one obvious reason, which is honesty. But there is another reason that editors think that citations of the paper when data are available increase, okay? And I think that the research that we have up to now says that it does not increase. The citations over 5 years are not different from the period before the data sharing was enforced, and that we don't know what happens, in 10 years, maybe in 10 years it's better, or we don't know if it's a question of enforcement or not enforcement, because this was a discontinuity on the policy, on the application of a policy. But it doesn't look like citations are very much affected by this. Again, this is a recent article by economists, by the way, by some economists in PNAS.
So actually, I think like the second part of the question has already been touched, and I want to go a little bit deeper into it. No, I mean, some of you have mentioned grace periods or embargo periods, right? In fact, the repositories that we use at journals, many of them allow you to actually publish the data right away, but it's only going to be available, like 2 years from now, or 3 or whatever, right? So the technology is there. I mean, my question is more about, and Guido was touching on some of those points, how do you enforce that? I mean, who determines, who deserves or doesn't deserve the grace period? How long should this grace period be, and all that? And in that respect, I mean, what do you guys think elaborate more on what you guys think that journals should do, and taking inside the perspective not only of the of the valid claim of the paper that would not be produced otherwise, but also on the how you determine what paper would not be produced otherwise, right? Let's start from Jose again.
That was not included in your list of questions, okay? And it's a difficult one, so why don't you start with Guido? No, it's just a joke, it's just a joke. No, I think this is clearly a very complicated question that has to be dealt with in a case-by-case basis and by the editors of the journal. I mean, you have to apply common sense. You have to look at the data and see if the claims that the data has been so hard to construct are reasonable or not, and in function of that, provide this grace period or not. I mean, the grace period is just one possible idea. It's the one that I throw, but there may be other ways of doing this. But I guess this is up to the editors to decide again.
Just to be clear, it's not like the researchers who are collecting costly primary data don't want to share data or anything. I don't want people to like, I have my first RCTs are already used for teaching purposes, and people can write their papers. So the Dunning-Kruger example, like when you have one single research question with a hypothesis behind it, and then you go and you collect the data and you answer that question, and I have papers like that too with the primary data collection, and then I do publish. I'm happy people use it for other purposes, whatever the purposes are. But sometimes it just like the data collection involves a huge infrastructure building for a huge research agenda. It's not one single research question, but the research questions will continue, and then you will test several hypotheses one after another, so it requires this infrastructure. So it's not just that you're collecting data to answer one single question, you're collecting data for an agenda to answer series of important questions that will be linked to each other. So a lot of the times now the development economists are engaged into this kind of business. So in this case, grace period makes sense. And in this case, you can ask the editor, I'm an editor, you can ask me, okay, I'm publishing this, you publish this, thank you very much, but could you give me 5 years before publishing the paper, before publishing the data, because I'm hoping to publish a few more. So you say 5 years, I say 5 years. Actually, the funders do this. So the ERC says 5 years later you have to publish. The grant ends, grant ends, say 2025. By 2029, you should have your data public. That's it. Right? You might go and negotiate and cry to make it 2030, and they might give it to you, but that's it. You just have to at some point, right? And J-PAL does the same thing. So many other funders do the same thing. The funders do this. I think the journals should be able to do this. That's it. That's all.
Yeah, well, to go back to the question, ideally the decision doesn't rest on one person, and for fairness concern doesn't rest on the I like you, so I'm going to say yes, right? So there should be more than one person involved. And it's just natural that it would be the editor and the co-editors or the board of the journal that thinks of something like this. And also, ideally, there's somewhere in the journal's policy a description, vague or not, of the process, but something that says that that's what it would be. Doesn't have to be we need to meet in this instance, but something that says, you know, this would be what's going on, because yeah, you for fairness sake, you don't want to just allow, okay, you because you're, you know, what I consider a good researcher, but not you because you're junior, for example. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as earlier someone commented on sort of trying to have very clear guidelines. Of course, that's difficult in cases like this. I think the decision whether to give people exemptions of various policies, and we have a whole bunch of policies. We have policies on length, on we have vaguer policies on what type of topics we're interested in, but they're vague. And in the end, these are decisions by the editorial board, and so I think the decision whether to give a grace period for making data available would similarly just be an editorial board decision. And I think some journals, I don't know whether we asked for that detail at the first submission, but I know the Journal of the American Statistical Association does, at the point of submission, ask whether you're going to make the data available, and if not, kind of why not, and what exactly are you planning to do? And so that's a point where you can negotiate or make clear what you would like and what you're planning to do. And the editors may use that in their decision. They may not. Just the same way they take the quality of the paper into account when they're deciding what to do with the paper. Of course, the journals are not infallible there. We try to do a good job, but it's hard. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of papers to be looked at, and we do our best. I try to do as well as Andrea Mascolel used to do when he ran the journal, and I might not always live up to that, but we try to do our best.
Yes.
Yeah. Some journals have data advisory boards with several people, like in some of them they have 20 people, okay? And they could take care at least or discuss these issues, because I think right now in all the journals, the first thing you have to say is if the data is going to be available or not, and before starting the referee process, that has to be clear, and the reasons why not, and the kind of exception you are asking for. And the data advisory board can review all those and say, you know, this yes, this no, these 5 years, this. It could help. I mean, obviously editors are in charge of the whole process, but having this data advisory board that many journals have could help.
So unless you guys want to follow up on any of this, I think it's the right time to also open the floor to questions from the audience. So we have mics here. So there's one question over there. We're going to start, and then we're going to go down. So. aquell noi d'allà dalt.
Hey, yeah, thank you very much for this really interesting talk. So I was thinking about how to reward more the data work. Well, one is to get the publication and follow up publications, but I also recently talked to a scholar that built up the US film level data set, and that was a huge amount of effort to build all that data up, what now is used in many different fields. And he said the most cited paper of him is, just a description of the data set, which is not yet published actually. It's just a super detailed description of the data. And I think that could also be a channel to reward all, the data work, where there is an initial description with basic descriptive statistics and a really many information, which, all followers will refer to, which will reward the work done, because I think this is really important to create channels, other than publication to reward all that work. So just as a suggestion and for the discussion.
So thanks. I think in the interest of time, maybe we collect several questions, if you don't mind. And then there was one behind you, Anna.
Who was next?
Yeah, my suggestion was very similar to the question that was just raised. Somebody spoke about a PSID survey. I feel there's a very well-documented code book how the data was collected. So for surveys, this exists. We'll happily cite them. Everyone knows these surveys. My suggestion is very similar to what has been made. Why can't we do this for other data sets? In other fields, for example, I'm from physics, there are data papers where researchers make a big data set. They go through all these details that you cannot put in a normal paper. And as been just said, people very happily cite these. Look, I'm using this data set. So same suggestion.
Okay, so we can collect two more perhaps and then answer. Chunchik.
Yeah, thanks a lot. My question was also, or comment in the same direction, the first one. And the second one, there are still funders who actually require that the data get destroyed after a period of time. So this is a complete opposition to basically the data transparency of the journal. So if you could comment on that, that would be great.
Okay, maybe one more. Okay, there.
So this is a bit of a personal experience. So there are now admin data, so they provide access to the data for editors, for instance, or replicators, but they don't give you any toy data. So what do you do in that case, for instance?
Okay, so I think it's now we can answer. So you can start if you want.
Okay, I'll try to be brief to let other people reply. The first few questions, this is like my dream question for a data editor, because what you can do as a researcher if you create data is you create your own deposit. You put your data out somewhere and you put the documentation that goes with it, and all those things become objects that you can refer to. And as a data editor, what I was saying earlier is I want people to provide proper data citations, which means those objects are going to be cited, which means it's not just, we're so used to thinking of papers, and a paper will get cited, but data can be cited too, and whatever else goes around the data. And that is true, by the way, also for Stata packages and routines that people write. Those things can be cited, and when I see that somebody is using a Stata package, I will say, that's good, please cite it. You're using someone else's work, you cite it. And so, yes, providing recognition for those pieces of work that are not purely, a publication in a journal is very valuable, and we need to be better at citing the data that we use and the packages that we use so that the people that work on those pieces are better rewarded for that. And then very quickly, the other question about destroying data, that's the worst thing. that's my nightmare. And there should be ways around that, preserving confidentiality and whatnot, but there should be ways around that. There should be ways around that, preserving confidentiality and whatnot, but there should be ways around that. 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 There should
I think, yeah, it's a good idea to reward the researchers, especially the one I was talking about, like a big infrastructure building projects, so that you just like, every year you build something, especially panel data building projects. And every time you build something, you also have some experiment in it, and then the next year you have another experiment and all that stuff. So you need to create documentation for this, for people to cite. But the grace period is not about that, actually. It's about your own questions to be answered by you for a while, and then maybe later on things that you did not think about, people can use it. One thing we never discuss here is the costly data production is something that seniors can do. Mostly juniors can actually don't have access to that kind of luxury. So one thing we should think about is sort of a public good provision, but protecting the collector, but also helping the juniors. So we just have to find a way to let people, especially junior people with some brilliant ideas about your data, can reach out to you and talk to you about your confidential data. So that should be open, and I don't know how you do that, because it's clearly, I mean, we spend so much money for costly data collection, but clearly a junior can't do that at that stage of their career.
Yes, I think we're all for giving more credit for the people collecting the data. I think that is hugely important. And if you see in the computer science and machine learning literature, that field has really benefited a lot from having made a lot of the data publicly available and giving people developing new methods places to try this out systematically. And so I think economics would similarly benefit from having central repositories and making clear what type of data available in a way that we can mimic some of the validation methods people have used in computer science.
Okay, so I think actually we're out of time, and some of you have to share some session. So we're probably going to cut it here. So thank you again for participating.